just wanted to say today, I'm not going to tell you my entire story, otherwise I'd be here all day if I did, and I want to spare you all the gruesome details. But I am a survivor of domestic violence. I was married in 1979. In those days, domestic violence wasn't really considered a crime. We called the police. The police didn't want to get involved with domestic violence. It wasn't considered a crime. But after a few years, they decided, after women were being murdered and bashed and everything, they realised, okay, domestic violence is actually a crime. So they started to do something about it. But back in those days, you didn't have state intervention orders. It was all done federally through the federal police. And when I had the violence with my husband, it was federal. I had to end up getting a federal intervention order, which meant that if I was bashed on the Friday night, I had to wait till Monday morning to report it. And then they could do very little about it. Anyway, but today what I want to mainly explain is even though we've come a long way since 1979, there still is a tremendous amount of ignorance with domestic violence in the general public. We are getting more educated about domestic violence, but with the general public there still is problems. And today I want to answer one question which most people who are affected by domestic violence ask. And everyone in this room will, at one stage, be touched by it, either by a family member, a nephew, or a son's friend, or whatever. You will hear about it. You'll hear about it in the news. And the question is, why do people stay in a violent situation? And that's what I want to explain today. Being in a situation of domestic violence, it doesn't happen on impact, like they don't come along and knock your lights out, as to speak. It happens in a very progressive manner. In my case, it happened by being bad-mouthed. I was a very staunch Christian at the time. I didn't believe in divorce. And my husband, he'd go out and have a bender. He'd have prescription drugs, get himself drunk, come home, and just start on me for anything. It could be that there was a cupboard door left open. There may have been shoes left untied, the children's toy on the floor. Didn't matter what it was. He would use that excuse to belt me. And with him, it was mainly hands around the throat, knife against the throat, and spit at me, pull my hair out, things like that. But as I say, in the beginning it didn't start like that. It was bad-mouthing, and I thought, well, he's just got a bad temper and I'll let it go. And the thing was, it got to a point where in time he started to be very physical with me, and he used to threaten me and tell me that if I ever left him, he would kill me, he would kill my family, he would kill my children. He threatened me, don't ever take my children away from me, I'll hunt you down, I'll slit your throat. He would say all this type of thing. So you had a fear there all the time, and it got to a stage where in your house you're just living on eggshells. You didn't know what to expect, but by being there you could see his demeanour. You could see the look in his eye. I could see, okay, tonight's going to be okay. He's not quite as volatile. Another night it would be, oh, he's got black eyes. It's going to happen. It was like that. So after this fear took hold, there's 3 stages of why a person won't leave. The first stage is fear. They get you on fear. They also do gaslighting. Now, if anybody knows about gaslighting, I don't know how many would, but gaslighting is where they get you to a stage where you feel like you're insane. Like you're not competent. And he used to tell me this. He used to say, well, you're insane, you know, you can't cope on your own. Look at you. Nobody else is going to look after you. And he groomed me. He slowly groomed me into a state where I was full of fear and felt that I had no hope. I was like a caged animal, living on eggshells. I had my children there, so I was constantly watching them. So I was gripped on fear. Now, the second stage is the shame. You feel so shamed that your life has gone this way. Like I had this big dream, you know, this romantic dream that I was happily ever after married, and then all of a sudden this dream turned into like Nightmare on Elm Street, and I was living with the monster, and the monster was in my bed, the monster was living in my house. And so therefore you feel so ashamed just to admit that. It's like you feel defeated. You just can't come across to people and say, I've failed at my marriage, I've failed at picking the right partner. Now number 3, so we've got number 1, which is fear. Number 2 is the shame. Number 3 is the isolation. So what they do with the isolation is they cut you off from your family. And the way my husband did it to me was he put my family down the whole time. All my friends, none of them were any good. And this is all I got in my ear all the time. It was a constant brainwashing. So I got to a point where I just wouldn't go there. I wouldn't go and see my family because I knew it was just going to be too much trouble for me. In the end, that's all I was going to get. But the whole time I had my children, I was looking for an escape. I wanted so much to be out, but in those days there was nothing. We didn't have what we have these days. We have like White Ribbon Day, we have domestic violence departments, but we didn't have anything like that in those days. And anyway, I remember feeling so desperate one day. I went to my mother, and I was constant, at the time, he thought it was pretty good to rape, so he would rape me a lot and hurt me a lot. And I went to my mother because I just had enough, I couldn't cope anymore. And I went to my mother and I asked her, what can I do? What can I do? I don't know what to do. And she said, you made your bed, you can lie in it. And I went home that day and I was just so defeated. I was so defeated. And I had other people say to me when I had to call the police at times on him being too violent, the police would say, why do you stay? But I had these threats. And I knew I couldn't stop him from seeing his children. And I knew for a fact that if I left him with the children, he was going to kill me. I had evidence of that. He'd done all these things to me before. I truly believed that he was going to kill me. So I was looking for this escape, and this is what domestic violence is like. The victim is looking for an escape. They're a caged animal. They're walking back and forth, looking for that gap. And the thing was, if I hadn't have got, I had to be sure in my own mind that I was going to safely get my children out. Now, there was one day I came home, and this was the beginning of my escape. He came home, and I had a 6-month-old baby. I was breastfeeding him, and I had a 3-year-old son at the time. He walked in, and I saw the look in his eye. I thought, oh no, here we go. Well, that particular day, he was worse than he'd ever been before. He belted me up. He kicked me. He picked my 3-year-old son up, threw him into a wall. This went on, the torment went on, and the abuse went on for 4 hours. Even though I was screaming for help, nobody would intervene. The neighbours didn't want to get involved. And in the end, he wanted more alcohol, so he says, right, we're going in the car. Now, I knew the car didn't have much petrol in it. Anyway, he threw me in the car, and he was really intoxicated and under the influence of drugs. And as we were going in the car towards his mother's to get some more money, we were going over land strips. We were almost crashing into poles, and I thought, this is it. Today's the doomsday. I'm going to die today. And we did make it to his mother's, and as soon as he went up the stairs, I jumped in the driver's seat and I got away. Well, it's like as though you block it out when you go through that much pain. All I wanted was my children to be safe, and I went to my mother and father, and when I got there I had no idea the state I was in. I had cuts on my neck from the knife, I had bruises all over my body, I had patches out of my hair, and I was just in quite a miserable state. But after that time I said, that's it, I would never go back. I will never go back. But when I fled from there, I had nothing. At the time, my son was 3 years old, my baby was 6 months old, and I found out a week after that I was pregnant, which made it even worse. So what I'm saying is, if people say to a victim like myself, why don't you get out? You've got to realise the tremendous amount of pressure that you are under. You are in so much pressure, walking on these eggshells all the time, and by somebody saying, why don't you get out, you feel like you're a failure anyway. You've got a rational person trying to pull you out of a situation and your violent partner pulling you the other way. You virtually feel torn down the middle, and it just adds more pressure, and it doesn't add a solution. And what a victim is looking for is a solution. They're looking for a solution, that way of escape. So the way of escape is if you can provide names, numbers, if you can say to the victim, if you need to get out at any time, come to my house. My house is a rescue place. It doesn't matter what time of night, come here. If you can provide, you can go here and get financial support here. We have clothes here. We've got toiletries here. We've got beds here. That's what a victim is looking for, because a victim will prefer to stay in a violent situation and know that they're with their children than get out and leave their children behind. So they're under so much pressure the whole time that it's really important to not pressure the victim any more than what they already are. So that was the main thing that I wanted to address today. Okay.